Hello and welcome to this loose watercolor painting tutorial. I'm so excited to dive in. We're going to start at the very beginning talking about different brush strokes that we can use and then how we're going to build these flowers before we create a full composition with it, which I confess is the part I'm the most excited about. I already mixed the colors in a separate video, so if you're interested in seeing that, go ahead and head over to this video and you'll see the whole process behind the color mixing, how we got these colors, how they're working together, and we'll even swatch them. I'm excited to dive into actually forming these flowers, of the raw elements, different brush techniques that we can use in order to get specific aesthetics. All right, I'm starting with a size 8 round brush. There's nothing super special about the size or anything like that, but it is a round brush, so you can see it is even on each side. It comes to a nice point. One thing to note, this is a watercolor brush, so it's going to hold more water. If you're using like a acrylic brush or more of an all-purpose, multi-purpose brush, it's not going to hold as much water. If you're new to watercolor and you have nice watercolor brushes like this one, your best friend is going to be a rag like this that you can just dab your excess water on. You can use a paper towel. This is just a bath towel that I cut into several pieces. And you'll want to, when you're dabbing your brush off, you're going to want to place down, make sure you're placing down kind of this barrel, the main chubby section of our brush, in order to really disperse some of that water. Because one of the biggest things that I see with new artists, new watercolor painters, is that they have too much water and they're not sure what to do with it. So if that's not a problem for you, don't worry about it. But if it's something like you just feel like you're constantly drowning your paper, dab your brush off before you place it down. That will get rid of any excess water so that you're not drowning before you even get started. For this tutorial, quickly I'm going to run through a couple of brush strokes, and we're going to use them kind of like pieces of a puzzle to put together in order to build that puzzle. So I'm going to start off, I'm just going to pull in some of our violet color, our Winsor Violet, or a purple. The color doesn't really matter. I'm just kind of showing you some of these different strokes. And we're going to talk about different positioning of your brush in order to get certain aesthetics and certain looks. Now, one thing to know is if you push your brush down a little bit more flat, like this, you're going to disperse less color. So this is lighter than if I take the same brush and I'm using just the tip and I'm pulling that across. Apparently not, it's a very steady hand. You can see that that color is lighter than this color. And then if I'm dabbing, I'm getting little puddles of intense and rich pigment. Whereas if I'm doing the same thing here, it's all lighter in disbursement. So that's something that we're going to use to our advantage and we're going to talk about a little bit, but I thought I'd just give you that quick show beforehand. So we're going to start with kind of our smallest strokes and work up to our largest strokes and then use them as the puzzle pieces to build our flowers and eventually create a full composition. So like we were just talking about, we can dab different things in order to dab our brush down in order to get a certain very rich concentrated look. I'm going to dab my brush off a little bit. I'm actually going to water it down a little bit so that the color isn't quite so intense. Now I can put these together in order to create different floral shapes. So I'm just tapping down, oops. There. I'm tapping down and going one tap on each side, and we've got kind of this nice little framed out look. Go in that direction. I can also go in this direction in order to create these different flowers. I can also do this kind of in a longer sense. Again, just pulling, and maybe I push down a little bit more, not a ton, to get more of a round, slightly rounded effect. Pushing, pulling up again, push down more, pull up again. And something like that might get me something like an aster or a mum. Add a little more water, dabbing my brush off. So I'm just going to push down, pull up, and do that coming towards the same section in order to get a very consistent look. And maybe I'll do it in a smaller effect down here to get kind of the same look, but make it look like this flower is turning away from me. And then if I take some yellow, if I clean my brush off real well, snag some yellow, and while this is still wet, plop that right in here. We've got a nice flower. Now I don't want to mess with that too much because yellow and purple are opposites, and so they will mix and make this nasty, muddy, brown, gray color. So after I add yellow into a purple, I don't want to play with that. But I just kind of wanted to show you some different ways that you can make this flower and just very simply add a lot of impact in there. The same thing, I'm going to actually take our blue, so our ultramarine blue, on my brush, and we're going to use these to make kind of like this more whimsical forget-me-not type look. So we're going to just take these little, or maybe kind of like, I'm changing my mind, we're making kind of a lavender, kind of the same idea, but this is more clustered together, whereas you can do something that's a little more whimsical. I take that same color. Oh, well, actually, we're going to take some green in here. And I'm just going to pull this down to make kind of a stem. I'll blend that all together. And we've got some lavender, or if you wanted kind of the forget-me-not, since I already said that, that would be a little bit more whimsical, but we're just doing like little dots, little kind of strokes, and they kind of come together eventually. But down here, and just, you can do 3, you can do a 4th and a 5th, and then we'll add some green. Kind of carry that around in order to get that classic forget-me-not curve. Now I'm forgetting what their leaves look like. Should have pulled up some images. I believe they're petite. And so same stroke, very different look overall for the flowers. Okay, so we've got this one. Jumping off of this, we're going to do more of an elongated pole where we're doing kind of the same step, but more aggressive. So I'm going in again with the blue. The color doesn't really matter. I'm just wanting you to be able to see it. So I'm going to start thin and just gently pressing, and then I'm going to press more aggressively, and then we're going to pull up. Now this, you can probably already tell, is great for like a petal or for leaves. With leaves, I like to start in the middle, push around onto the left side, come back kind of towards the middle, and then do the same thing on the other side, but focusing it more on the left side. But see how we got nice and broad in the middle? That'll give us kind of that classic leaf. You can also twist it. So they're going a little bit to the left, coming around to the right, and bringing that in. But I got real thin a little earlier, and then I go on to the right-hand side, and I just kind of come into this section. We've got this like twisted leaf in here. So you can have a little bit more fun with it where they're kind of playing around, kind of going down and coming up to a point. And then let's say I want it to be a little thicker up here, coming down and just coming to a point earlier. I love to have this negative space here, kind of where a vein would be. A negative space is anywhere where there is no subject, or in this case, no pigment, so there's no paint there in that line. Use that to your advantage. So I'm starting from this side, and you can pull towards you or push away from you. So I am going to go away from me in this section. We're going a little bit more onto the left side, coming in. And then I can even reverse it, start at this tip, go more on the right-hand side, and pull back down. And maybe I didn't go far enough, so we're just going to do the same thing a little bit on the outside. And this one, you'll find that there's a lot more variation that we can come up with. There's a lot of fun pigment being placed down by just having this more elongated turn. You can even add a little bit here, and look, you've got this leaf kind of turning around and flipping. So not limited to just leaves. Obviously we have very blue leaves here right now, but I'm actually going to take some of this golden tone that we've mixed, mostly yellow, adding a little bit of our red in here, permanent alizarin crimson, to get kind of a golden tone, and I'm going to kind of just dab this in. So we're going to kind of bring this in here, but I want some nice thick color in there, but I don't want it to be too consistent on the inside or on my edges. I want there to be some texture there. And I'm going to clean my brush off, take some very watered down blue. We even add a little bit of our green to it to get kind of this watery gray color. I'm just going to barely touch the edge of this, pull out, come to a point, and come back in. Now this is able to stay light because my water, this is very watered down, and then I'm going to take this and I'm just going to boop, dab off any excess. And then we're going to come down and continue these long strokes. Now you can also shorten these strokes a bit in order to get different shapes. So this is more of like a echinacea or a coneflower type look. And if too much of it is disappearing, you can kind of go on the edges again. So elongated will give you kind of this more echinacea look. Now, if you want something that's a little bit tighter, like let's say a buttercup, I'm actually we're going to do the same thing again. We're just going to reverse it. So I'm going to take some red, mix it in with our yellow. We'll get this kind of orangey center here. I'm really dabbing that in to get it nice and pigmented. Cleaning my brush off, going in with our yellow. So we've got this nice buttery yellow, and we're going to do kind of the same thing, but we're going to shorten it. So instead of pulling for a long time, I'm going to place my brush down and immediately go to the left, go back to that center, and then do the same thing on the right, and do kind of one more dab in the center. You can really fill that whole thing in and kind of do it from the side so it's a little bit more narrow, but where we're immediately going in, we don't have kind of a long tail on one side. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to immediately go off to the left. Let's make it more orange so you can see it a little better. Immediately go off to the left, tap in, immediately go to the right, and then kind of bring that in. I'm being careful not to totally close this off because that negative space will help us to understand the shape of the flower a little bit more. Grabbing some more pigment. We're going to go in on this side and do the same thing. So I'm not quite overlapping this section. I'm going around, pulling it in. Going around and around. Tap. Maybe these kind of overlap a little bit, and then this section need a little more orange so you can see it. I'm going to do just a curve because I don't want to lose all of the negative space that we have in here. So that's where it kind of becomes confusing. We've got kind of these strokes that we're kind of memorizing, and then we'll be filling in between them. But in order to get the same look, we're going to kind of mimic that stroke, but just in a slightly different way. And I'm going to add a little bit of color on the side here, and we've got this pretty little shadow here created. I'm going to add a little bit more red in here, just to tap that in for some fun color explosion. So negative space. Have we talked enough about it? It really is the key when working with these loose florals, because without it, it just becomes one blob. So if we were to create the same shape, but not have the negative space, we'd have this petal here. Let's deepen that a little bit more. I would pick yellow for this one. So we have this shape, and then we have this one that comes off of it here. And then we've got another bump here, another petal here, and then we've got one that's a little more broad here. And you see the difference? Now we can still add some character to this. Maybe you're saying like, well, you don't have any fun red in the middle. Of course it doesn't look great. You see what I'm saying? It's really having those negative spaces, carefully painting around what you've already painted. Working on these brush strokes will be kind of your key. Now we're going to work a lot with kind of a modification of this one. So we've already kind of shortened it. Now we're going to widen it a bit and also add a little bit of texture. So let's go back to our purple because that showed up nicely. And I'm going to go immediately left, but with a little bit of like a wiggle. So we're going to go immediately left, but wiggle it at the top and then turn and come down. Adding a little bit of water, just a dab of water. And we're going to wiggle, come down. And you can probably already tell kind of the shape that we're coming in to. I'm going to leave a little bit of negative space here, but just kind of a sliver. And we've got a nice petal, and you can see it even is turning a little bit this way. Can you make a shorter one? Yes, of course we can. So we're going to pull this way, and that time I didn't wiggle at the top, but I'm going to on this side. So I'm going to wiggle and pull, respecting that line. Let's do it here. So I'm going to pull, and then we're going to wiggle at the top instead and pull here. I'm going to include the wiggle. But where it's all with the same kind of stroke, where my brush is flattened a little bit more against the paper. All right, and let's add wiggling and then bring it down. And then we're going to, respecting that space, wiggle it, pull down towards the center, and then finish it on this side. Now, do you have to have negative space between every single shape? No, that's part of the beauty of working a little bit looser, is like this area blended together a little bit more. That's totally fine. What you don't want to do is, if I were to add a petal back here, which I'm going to add with a little bit lighter pigment, so a little watered down, I don't want to completely close this off. I might have it, I like to have them touch a little bit. So I might do one of these where they're kind of coming together just a touch. But if I were to fill this in, that would just look like one giant mass. But having that little bit of negative space in there really, really helps. See how I can continue to add layers, but by having just a little sliver of something being a little different helps to keep it from becoming just a giant blob. And let's take our red again. I don't know, I'm enjoying a red center right now, a red eye for my florals right now. And we'll let that kind of blend out. So we're going to use kind of what we just kind of learned, where we have, I didn't really separate this out. We have kind of a flattened wiggle that comes down and maybe comes down and around again. We've got this section, we've got kind of our shortened circular motion. We've got a nice long pull where we're flattening it out in the middle and then coming to points on both ends. We have elongated strokes and we've got these short little strokes. So we're going to use this to build different flowers in order to create a full composition. Now that we have a little bit of practice in, we have a little bit of terminology and our brushes are warmed up, we're gonna create a composition. Now I'm gonna have kind of a loose sketch put down because that is who I am. Unfortunately, I'm not one of those creatives that can just grab a brush and make something gorgeous. I need a little bit of prep, a little bit of work from my memory. So we've got some larger flowers, a little bit smaller. Let's do like a little cascade of our smaller flowers, and we'll have some greenery here and maybe something down here. I don't know. I'll kind of figure it out. It's very loose. I'll have a quick overlay for you to kind of help you out, but it's not super professional. It just kind of helps me understand space. I'm just not good enough at doing it on my feet. So we're gonna grab our same brush and we're gonna start working with kind of this larger petal shape. All right, so we've got some nice watered down pigment. I'm pulling from our pink color, which was our alizarin crimson, mixed with a little bit of our light yellow color and some white. I'm just gonna pull that down, not overcomplicating it too much. Now I'm going to go in with our next petal. Sorry, just adding a little bit more pigment. I'm gonna zoom you in a little bit. Our next petal will be the same, but we're going to have it kind of in a curve in order to give a more realistic look. Okay, so I'm going to start with kind of a wiggle at the top and then pull down right towards this center section that we have. And I'm going to respect this negative space, carefully pulling it down. It's okay if these negative line spaces don't touch necessarily. That's not their job, it's just to help give a little bit more direction. I'm placing a little pigment down because I think that this is just a little lighter than I originally was planning. Picking up some more pigment and we're going to really make a thin one. So we're gonna work more kind of like this, again with a curve. So we're going to actually, I'm gonna kind of wiggle it on the side here and then bring it up. So I'm trying to get kind of the look of some foreshortening happening in here, and then we're gonna do this other side. Pulling it in and down. And I'm going to, and I don't mind kind of this point that's up here. You'll see that a lot in florals anyway, so it's okay to keep it. If you don't like it, you can just kind of pull it in and incorporate it. I'm going to pull this in just a touch while it's still wet, grabbing some more pigment, a little more water. So I'm pulling, and then this side is where we'll have kind of our wiggle. We'll have that wiggle at the top, give it a more organic look. Pull this in, pulling a little bit more pigment. So I'm grabbing more pigment from my palette. I'm just going to, with the tip of my brush, dab that in a little bit more, but blending it with these bigger strokes. So blending it down with that bigger stroke. This needs a little bit more, so I'm going to, I'm not sure if I'll connect it yet, but I'm going to place one down here with a wiggle and bring that kind of together. I think I'm going to join them here. Maybe elongate that out a bit. All right, now I'm going to go in with some golden yellow, and I'm going to tap some of that pigment in here. We're getting this nice, pretty yellow center. It's a little orangey for what I initially intended, so I'm going to go in with some pure yellow, tap that next to it, and maybe in some of these areas. And I'm letting the color touch some of my pink, and that will allow it to bleed a little bit. If we need to, we can go back in with a little bit more concentrated pigment later. All right, I'm going to do something similar over here just to kind of repeat the process to help you if you're still struggling a little bit. This time I'm going to add some more of our ultramarine blue to that pink to get kind of our mauve-y tone. Reserve this half for the pink, the original pink color, because we'll want to revive that in a little bit. All right, so we've got our pink bloom in here. I'm going to go in with another one. We're just going to kind of do the same thing. The biggest thing I'm struggling with a little bit is size. I want to make sure that this is big enough to fill this page and make it worth it. All right, so we're going to do kind of the same thing, but on this side we're going to start with kind of a wiggle up, coming down, and down again. I'm going to elongate that though, so we're going to just go ahead at the top, do the same thing. And picking up more pigment. And I want to make sure that these two can overlap, but I already painted this one, so this will obviously be the one in front. So either my petals will act like they're kind of touching at the same point, or this one will need to go underneath. And if you need help with the color mixing, that is all in part 1 of this video, and I'll have that linked down below. Okay, I'm just gonna blend that in here. It's looking a little like a balloon, so I'm going to just make the shape a little bit more petal-like real quick. Just going over everything, apparently. All right, let's add another petal here. I'm gonna have it kind of underlapping. We got a wiggle, I'm pulling it in. I need a little more yellow. See how this, I don't know if you can tell, this is brighter than that. So I'm going to add a little more yellow to our mauve tone to mauve it up a little less purple. And I'm going to move on to this next petal. Bring it down, give it a wiggle. And then same over here. So respecting that negative space. That wiggle didn't go so hot, so let's add a little bit more. If you have enough pigment on your brush, you don't have to go over this petal, your petals quite so much. You shouldn't have to do this double painting like I am, but I didn't have enough color mixed. All right, I'm going to take that same yellow that we added in. I'm going to carefully dab that in. So again, it will kind of desaturate the purple tone, the mauve purple tone, if we add too much all at once. All right, now I'm gonna go in with our yellow. So we've got this yellow with a little bit of our alizarin crimson. So it's just a little more golden tone, and I'm going to play with some of these like buttercup-y type shapes. We're gonna do some from the side and some more kind of front and center. So I'm gonna do some down here. I'm going to have a curve like this, but then the others are going to come around a little bit more like this. They're curving around a bit more. And this one's going to be just like a bud. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of green kind of right at the center here. Just tapping that in, and I'm going to take some green and place it at the base here and start to pull our stem out. I'm going to make the stems connect, but just to kind of get it blending in there. I think will be interesting. I'm also going to go back in, clean brush. I'm going to tap in a little bit more mauve in here so it doesn't spread too much. I like it spreading in here. I'm not loving it as much in our mauve-y tone. We'll see how that dries. We might have to go back and do a little bit of fixing. And then let's do an open, kind of faced out buttercup here. So we've got there. I'm going to have it go underneath here. These are different colors so they can touch a little bit more gracefully. All right, pulling in some of the deeper tone in here with a little bit more of the red mixed in, so it's a little more orangey, a little bit deeper. All right, now with that green, we're going to just tap that into the center here and let that kind of blend out. All right, I think I want to add, since we have kind of yellow heavy here, I want to add one more over here on the right-hand side, just kind of from kind of a profile. So just a little bit from the side. So we'll do one that's a little bit kind of a C shape. And then a rounded petal. And then another kind of C shape. Take a little bit of that green, just tap it in, and I'm going to actually bring it down, bring it in. I like how that nice dark green kind of pulls in some interest. And do a couple dabs in here. Kind of like some little stamen. All right, we'll let that blend nicely. I'm cleaning my brush off. Let's go in with, let's see, should we do blue or purple? Blue or purple? I'd like to have, I think I'm gonna take our mauve color and add more ultramarine blue. And we're gonna make some soft, thinking kind of lavender, but a little bit softer. So this was a little bit more like this, where we got a little softer. And then as it's drying, we'll dab in some extra color in there to add kind of some eyes or a little bit more of a refined center. So I'm actually going to turn the paper this way, so it's on the side, just so I'm not dipping my hand in some of this pigment. So let's add it here. Okay, so we got kind of these long dashes. I might do some of them in kind of like a curved. What are we doing? Lavender? So I like to start where it's smallest. I know I didn't do that this time. That's what I do recommend doing. Oops. Starts a little smaller. I'm watering my brush down a little bit and dabbing it off so there's a little less pigment and a little less water on. And we're just, again, kind of creating these steps. I'm rounding them out a little bit so they're not quite as harsh and like dinosaur feet. So instead of being quite like this, I'm kind of curving them just a bit more. And keeping that in like a kind of a row. A row would have been better. I kind of departed from that a little bit more in my what am I doing search. wish it was a little bit more airy than I made it, so we'll do another one that is a little more light. Dab off my brush. And then I'm just, while this is still wet, I'm pulling my damp brush through here to pick up some of that excess pigment. That will lighten it and give it a little more depth and interest. Occasionally connecting some of these areas. And then I'll make this one much lighter. And then as that's drying, I'm going in with the tip of my brush, so not as much on the side, and therefore depositing more pigment, more concentrated pigment. And this one doesn't really need it. It's pretty deep already. Rinsing my brush off, dabbing it off, so I've got a dirty, damp brush, and just pulling some of this in. And then I'm going to add another one over here. It's always a good idea to repeat those elements. So again, kind of dinosaur feet. Maybe in different directions, a little bit rounded though. And we might add one more down here, but for now this is good. Adding in some of that deeper pigment. Tapping it in a little bit more. Cleaning my brush off, wiping it off. I'm going to take some of the green that we have, very sap green-esque. I'm just going to kind of pull it up in here. I like it best if it bleeds. It's probably a little too late for that to happen, so we're just going to keep it very light and airy. So in order for it to bleed, you're working pretty fast on these sections and, you know, finishing a whole flower for the most part before you move on to the next one. All right, next we're going to add in some greenery, pulling in, again, our very sap green. I'm going to go in our cooler tone one. It's a little bit more blue. And we're going to make some large leaves. So I'm going to start a long pole, wiggling down. I bet the olive green might have been a better choice for this. And then while that is still wet, I'm going to take a little bit of yellow and just run that along the side. So my brush was still dirty and I dipped into the yellow. So it's still very green, but just kind of dipping that in helps to add a little bit of interest. And I'm going to take my paint again and make another leaf here. Again, kind of more of the blue tone. We'll add a little bit of that yellow in. So kind of working around these shapes. Rinsing my brush off, taking that yellow. We're just going to dab some of it in here. Rinsing my brush off. I'm going to now water down my pigment, so there's a little bit more water. Dab it off, and this will be kind of a lighter leaf. I'm going to tuck this in kind of behind our lavender. And then another one here. keeping it very light. This will help create a lot of depth in the painting overall and helps to kind of frame everything in. So see how we're starting to come together a little bit more? I'm going to create some more leaves. So we're thickening up that paint again, just by mixing more of it in. We got our cooler tone that we're working with. And I'm going to create a leaf here. Let's thicken up that color a little bit, just by mixing more of it so it's not quite so watery. Dabbing my brush off. A nice big leaf. And I'm going to dab more of that thicker pigment in here. It's drying so fast. I'm not used to this paper anymore, I guess. And then same trick with our kind of dirty yellow paint. We're just going to tap that into here a bit and allow that more yellow color to kind of come through just a touch. And then I want another leaf off to the side, this one a little more watered down. Tapping my brush off. And I want it to underlap here, so I'm going to start, pull it and twist, stop. I'm going to do another kind of watered down leaf. Should I do it here? What should we do? I want to repeat this pink here somewhere, so I think I'm going to make, I don't know if I'll do a bud or just another flower here. We could do another larger flower here. And just have it be from the side. So I'm going to resurrect some of this pink paint that we have mixed. I'm going to turn this over so I don't put my hand in this. And I'm going to make a flower here somehow. So wiggling at the top, bringing it in. Wiggle, bring it in. I've lost some of my negative space here, so I have to make up for that in a second. We're just going to curve this down a bit. Well, I don't love that, but that's okay. I'm just going to tuck it in back here a little bit more. All right, and I'm going to add a little bit more greenery because that was going significantly better than whatever that is. I'm just going to add the hint of a leaf in here, kind of like filling in a puzzle piece, letting that kind of fade. I'm going to take our sap green color, kind of tap that in there. And I'm going to use it to make some little leaves and then connect these guys all together. All right, I feel like we could handle having one more element in here. Should we add the echinacea? We could add the echinacea over here. Maybe a little more cool tone. I kind of want to add another sprig of lavender over here. So we're going to migrate, put another little sprig kind of coming off. I'm going to make it kind of wild. Get a little more pigment on my brush. Just start tapping our little kind of dinosaur feet, rounded dinosaur feet. And I'm kind of dipping into the more pink side a little bit. So this is a slightly pinkier lavender. All right, that wasn't quite as wispy as I was hoping, but that's okay. Dip into our green and bring that up. And I think I'm going to add like some berries. Let's take our ultramarine blue and again mixing that in with the mauve. So this will just kind of desaturate it a little bit so it won't be quite so bright. Do I want to? I don't know. Do I want to? Yeah, let's do it. And we're going to just make some nice little sections like a strand, carefully respecting some of that negative space. I'm going to mix a little bit into the red so we'll have kind of a mauve-ier tone. Some mauve, more mauve-like berries. And then we have some that are a little bit more blue and some in between. All right, taking our green again, using the very tip of our brush, we're just gonna tap in and bring these kind of together. I'm leaving some airiness in here because again, I want it to kind of feel very light. So just kind of leaving some areas a little disconnected. Your brain will connect them. You don't need to go crazy. All right, let's add a little bit more greenery. I'm going to keep it soft. We can always deepen it. I'm going to add some greenery back here. If you're having trouble getting the tip, just come in from the other direction for that side. I'm going to keep it a little low, a little smaller. All right, let's take a step back and just kind of examine everything. So we're going to pause, we're going to squint our eyes. These leaves are real dark and this is dark. So I need to deepen something else in here in order to kind of get it to fit. Let's try, we'll just deepen this leaf and see if that's enough. Or if we need to go in a little bit and just kind of darken everything a little bit. Thinking kind of in here, I like kind of the center of this one. I actually like how this one is. This is the one I'm having trouble with. Can you tell I don't normally paint with purple? We just don't get along as well. And I'm just going to kind of go in the center here and tap that in. Dabbing that off. And I'm kind of massaging where this bloom is with my brush, just gently. It didn't blend so great. So I'm going to mix some more of this mauve tone and we'll just kind of dab it in here in a more concentrated way. Now because the mauve has a ultramarine blue, it will separate a little bit. That's okay. We're just gonna tap this in here. Maybe I'll even use that to my advantage. Let's grab some blue. We're just gonna tap that in here and let the blue kind of take center stage. Now I'm going to rinse off my brush real well. I'm even going to put it in my clean water to make sure it's nice and clean. Dabbing it off a lot on my paper towel so it's not too wet, and I'm going to just drag it along this edge. That'll give it a much softer blend overall. I'm going to add one more sprig of the lavender. I'm getting distracted. All right, taking a little bit of that purple and this section that's dry, I'm just going to kind of, the mauve-y color, just going to add that in there just to bring this all together. That contrast will help to give it a little bit more of an emphasis, which I think was part of what was missing over here. So I'm going to call that good. It was a fun painting. I hope that you enjoyed this beginner-friendly painting tutorial with me. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And if you'd like more beginner-friendly, more looser style painting tutorials, let me know in the comment section below and I will try to add them into the schedule soon. I hope that you are having a wonderful, wonderful day. If you'd like to see more of the Gardentober prompt list that we're going through, I'll have that all linked down below. And until next time, happy painting.